Welcome back, everybody. We're here for our second episode of the day, our second show of the day, and this is all about Moon Knight. We're going to be doing our full spoiler review of the Moon Knight series, and I have some great guests with me for this one. And as you know, there's a lot of things going on in the next couple of days for me. So first and foremost, let's talk about Free Comic Book Day. Free Comic Book Day is happening tomorrow, Saturday. Go to your comic shops early to get the best books that you could possibly get. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Stranger Things, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Archie, Marvel, DC, you name it. It's all going to be part of Free Comic Book Day. And with that being said, I will be doing multiple shop locations. I'm going to be going to Squiggy's Dugout, Spider's Web, which is going to hold some really cool event with a lot of local artists there. And then I'm going to wrap it up my day at White Plains Comic Fest. That's where I'm going to be, and that's where I'm going to end up my day. I'll be giving away free sketches, guys. You heard it here. I'm giving away free sketches. No cost, nothing to you. Just stop by to the Galleria and come down to the White Plains Comic Fest. It is absolutely free. Another thing I want to point out to everybody is that this Monday, I'm going to have my interview with Ben Harvey, who is a fantastic artist. He's done some amazing covers for Marvel, DC, and some other independent books. As you can see here, he's done some anime stuff. He's done some manga stuff. He's done a Hellboy cover. He's great stuff. So be on the lookout that. Again, if you didn't catch it earlier today, go back and watch the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness video. I had a great time with Achilles talking about Doctor Strange. It was great. It was fun. It is a spoiler review of Doctor Strange. So when you get a chance, if you haven't watched the movie, go watch the movie. And then when you finish, come back to the Izzyverse and see it. With that said, I want to introduce to you my guest for this episode of Moon Knight. I want to first introduce someone that was with me earlier today, and that is Achilles. Welcome back, Achilles. You're back here, man.
Yes, good to be back.
All right. And also, you may have seen him in my Star Wars reviews, and he's doing the review with us as well here. And it's my good friend, Andrew Frank Rodriguez. What's up,
Hello.
Andrew?
Hello, everyone. Hey, Izzy, how you doing? Hey, Achilles, long time no see.
All right, guys, let's talk a little bit about Moon Knight and what Moon Knight was all about. So Moon Knight was a six issues. I'm talking like it was a comic book, right? Moon Knight was a 6-episode Disney Plus series starring the one and only. Wow, my name just went blank for a second. Oscar Isaac. I'm sorry. Oscar Isaac playing the character Moon Knight, Marc Spector, Stephen Grant, and we'll talk about all the other characters that are in here. Also, it features Ethan Hawke in it, and who did a fantastic job in this show. So let's go and talk a little bit more so about our overall opinions of Moon Knight as a series as a whole before we even start diving into spoilers. So let's start with you, Andrew. Andrew, what was your initial thoughts of Moon Knight?
As I finished watching Moon Knight and looking through it, my initial reaction is it's kind of a standalone. It felt like more of a standalone series for itself, and a tie-in to the Marvel universe maybe explained later, like the cinematic universe later. But I liked it. Generally, I did enjoy it. The one thing I loved about the entire Moon Knight thing was the costumes and the cinematography, and of course, just Mr. Knight, man. Mr. Knight was like my favorite. Steve Grant was like my favorite character in the whole show. Yeah. So I'd be like, yeah, I'm a Steve Grant fan.
You're Team Steve. Okay. Achilles, what about you, man?
I loved it. I thought that this is one of those shows where the writing, the directing, the production, the costume, similar to let's just say a good chunk of Game of Thrones, where you could feel that all the different elements were working really, really hard and coming together. And it almost makes it harder to appreciate the value for each one because it all just seems so easy, so seamless. But and it's like Andrew said, I felt that it was great as a standalone, but it also felt a little elevated from what we had seen from other shows. So I thought it was absolutely great. I loved it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to piggyback on what both of you said. what I agree with both of you is that it was a standalone. That there was hardly any mention of anything else prior in the MCU. So this could have been in its own universe, and it felt that way. That's one thing I would say, and that's a good. I want to say that's a good thing for, especially for new viewers, that they go in and they oh, it's another comic book show. Oh, to get to this one. Now it's almost 30, right? We're at the 30 mark, because if you include the TV series, it's like there's a lot of already backstory that a lot of people need to do their homework for. We were just talking about Doctor Strange, and Doctor Strange was very much the exact opposite of that, right? Where it's like you should have watched WandaVision before you go watch Doctor Strange. But this is not a Doctor Strange review. You could go check that one out. Again, one thing I wanted to mention to all my viewers here, it is very important to me that you hit that like and subscribe. Leave a comment. If you're here in the live show, if you're watching the live show, leave us a comment. Tell us what your thoughts. Tell us what you think. I might put them up. Be on, again, if you're watching this live, go for it. And leave a like and subscribe to the channel. So let's talk about Moon Knight, the comic book character. So Achilles, I'll ask you first. What do you know about Moon Knight, the comic book character?
Okay. Well, I'll probably be able to offer maybe a different perspective than the two of you, because when I was growing up, every time I picked up a Moon Knight comic, I didn't read them. I didn't like them based off of the art. Now, the art was beautiful. It was different than the other way the other comic books looked. So that artist, it had its own little style. But it just wasn't for me. The same way that I can acknowledge that the Beatles created great music, it's just not for me. The art at Moon Knight, it just wasn't for me. And he had virtually no interaction with the rest of the Marvel universe. So there was never a need for me to know who he was or whatever. I just thought he's kind of Batman-ish with a white costume, but none of his villains, nothing grabbed me. So I went into watching this series. If someone said, well, what do you know about Moon Knight? I would say, I know his name is Moon Knight, and he runs around in the white costume, and I think he only fights at night. That's all I knew going into it.
Yeah, and that's fair, because Moon Knight in particular was, for many, many years, a B-list character. In some cases, a C-list character. All right? For many years, he did have moments, that comic book character had moments of ups and downs as a series. But before I'll share my little historic understanding of Moon Knight. What about you, Andrew? What can you tell me about your understanding of Moon Knight?
I remember Moon Knight because my brother had the old, and I used to love reading the Werewolf by Night books. So I know that he appeared there. I'm not sure at the time, until I finally researched that was his first appearance of Moon Knight, and he was really, I always thought was kind of crazy, because when I think of Moon Knight, and I know people always like to make the comparison of like Batman and stuff. What's really cool was they always put him where there was always some kind of supernatural bad thing happening, but then you had other better superheroes who could handle the situation. So all his situations, when I used to read, especially like the latest arc, he's there because if there's a problem with anything that is Egyptian related / evil artifacts, and pretty much what really turned me off was there was 3 people who were Moon Knight in one, and it was okay, so when I first read it, I was okay, so he's like Deadpool. So that was the weird thing, where he's not Deadpool. No, he's not Deadpool. So
no,
it's it was always felt like we have this good looking character, but there's always been so many. And I'm gonna tell you right now, I talked to a couple of friends of mine. He's been redone so many times. It's wild to understand. Right now, I did read Mr. Knight, so when I saw Mr. Knight, and I kind of dig what they did with Mr. Knight, that's what I was like. But yeah, that's all I really knew about Moon Knight, because he's just not used like he normally is. He usually is a standalone comic. He usually is just a standalone character, and it's usually his own arc until the Midnight Suns.
Yeah.
And,
so with Moon Knight in particular, what I can say about Moon Knight in particular is that he did have a lot of runs that was mostly short lived because he never caught on. Even though if you give him to the hands of the right writer, I'll say you could do a lot of things with that character, especially with the situation that he does have multiple personalities. That's the first thing. Moon Knight is a character with multiple personalities. In fact, he has three personalities. In this particular show, he has two. He has two personalities in this show, but in the comic books, there's three personalities. We'll get to talk a little bit more when we get to spoilers. In the first series, which I would consider probably the best series of with the exception of the Jeff Lemire series run that he had not that long ago, the art was done by comic legend Bill Sienkiewicz, who, if anybody knows comics, knows Bill Sienkiewicz. And Bill Sienkiewicz artwork is amazing. And it's no difference here with his Moon Knight. Moon Knight was always he always had the best covers. He always had some of the best art in that time. So that's one thing. Another run that was very popular for Moon Knight was during the mid 90s. In the mid 90s, Moon Knight was a big deal because they signed the artist known as Stephen Platt. I don't know if you guys are aware of Stephen Platt. Stephen Platt was an image artist who wasn't an Image. He was the next big thing at that time. So, and you know, when I mean like he was the next big thing, I mean like everybody wanted him. And somehow he was in Moon Knight. And his artwork elevated that series solely on his artwork, because the stories, again, they weren't as catching as all the other stories, right? And he was compared to as Batman. He was Marvel's answer to Batman. But one thing I will say about this particular show, now that I'm gonna start talking a little bit about the show, is that this show did not touch that. They didn't touch the fact that this is Marvel's version of Batman at all. There was nowhere in this show that you thought, oh, this is just their Batman, right? The other thing that he was important is that he did serve in the West Coast Avengers, right? He couldn't even be part of the real Avengers. He had to be in the West Coast side.
Yeah.
He was a big part of the West Coast Avengers. That's what we know about Moon Knight, the comic book character. So, however, he did have a bit of a cult following, and that which led to the TV series that we have here. So, when we talk about Moon Knight, the TV series, we are going to look at the different types of characterizations that we're seeing. Just like we said, Stephen Grant. We're going to talk about Marc Spector, who is Moon Knight. So the character is Marc Spector, but Stephen Grant is another character within Marc Spectrum. And we'll look at Arthur Harrow, which in the comic books was very, very short-lived. And we'll talk about Layla. We'll talk a little history about all of them. So with that said, guys, it is now time for us to give the spoiler warning. The spoiler warning is up for everybody to see. I'm gonna leave it up for everybody right here. We are going full spoilers into the season of Moon Knight. You've been warned. If you haven't seen it, go watch it, guys. It's a really good show. It is definitely worth watching. Go check it out, guys. So full spoiler warning on Moon Knight, guys. All right, you ready? Let's talk a little bit about Moon Knight. What are your thoughts? Did you like it as far as a cohesive story? Let's start with Andrew this time.
Yeah, I absolutely like the fact that they didn't start this series with Mark. They started with Steven.
Yeah,
it's because, and I believe it's because he was more of the latest run of the comics. Like, Steven was was introduced recently from newer readers. People knew Mr. Knight rather than Moon Knight. So I actually thought it was a very smart thing to do. And I mean, Stephen Grant's Isaac Ozzick's Stephen Grant. I was just like, yep, that's my Stephen Grant that I remember from the comics. Yeah. So yeah, and I love the fact that they started out with him. You'd see he was like a kind of a bumbly guy. He had I thought it was hilarious because he tied himself to the bed, and like in the first few minutes, it's like he fell out of his bed, and then he was like sand around his circle, and then like you're like, what is this guy? What is this character? Like he literally had a room of a guy who's very bookish. Like I was like, that's my room. It's like a room full of like it's a room full of books, and like books everywhere, and pieces of like flair in here that you know. So I was like, yeah, I think that was a smart just to get the audience. Like Stephen Grant's your audience, so I love that.
Yeah. What do you thought, Achilles, watching that first episode, the goldfish problem? That's what it's called.
I thought it was surprising. I was like, oh wow, this is a mystery, right? And what the first episode established, and it continued throughout, really was that it was almost like when you go to a Comic-Con now, and it's so much about the TV shows and the movies and the celebrities and the autographs and stuff, and you forget that Comic-Cons were originally about comic books, and it used to be comic book vendors and all that kind of thing.
Remember that?
Like,
remember those days?
This is a show where you don't have to, because I saw it immediately in the first episode, and it continued to be that way. It was like, oh my God, this isn't about how it ties into the rest of this DC and Marvel book. They're all the same. They're like, you want to throw this and this camera. I was like, oh my God, in order to watch Moon Knight, you don't have to watch other superhero stuff. You actually need to do maybe some archaeologist type research and stuff. Like
you got to watch The Mummy,
right? Because there was some stuff they put in there that I was like, oh, Egyptian stuff. I got to say, I'm not necessarily super big on the history of it, and I just thought, wow, this is so refreshing to get a clean superhero show, right? That you can just watch it self-contained and figure stuff out. And the mystery part works well for this character because he is a mystery to some. Well, for people like me who never read the comics, I didn't even know he had other personalities and stuff like that until you get the bits and pieces where, oh, but I thought you were I thought you don't eat steak, or I thought you were vegan, and you know, those little bits and pieces that start to sprinkle in throughout that first episode. I'm like, oh wow, there's a duality here that I didn't realize. So I love that it's a mystery to the main character and a mystery to the audience.
Yeah, I agree with you. And really, with this first episode, which I will say I think was a slower episode than all the other episodes, we really didn't get Moon Knight in this episode. It's a show about Moon Knight, and we didn't get a lot of Moon Knight. In fact, we get a very small sample of Moon Knight at the very end, within the last 5 minutes of the episode. All it was character building for Steven, because we didn't even get Mark, right? We got this character named Stephen Grant who works in the British Museum. He is abused.
You guys read the comics. Did you know him to be Mark or
he is Mark? Mark's the character.
Mark, yeah.
So when he was being called Stephen Grant in the show, what did you think that was? Because Andrew, you said you didn't realize that because that it was a different personality, or whatever. Did you?
I read the comic books for all the. I read a couple of the old comic books back in even the 90s, but when they started with Steven, my head was like, oh, okay, they're starting with the character of a more famous book that had been made a lot with Mr. Knight. So Steven is after Steven, I was like, okay, he's Mr. Knight. So I did not know where they're going with this. So like when I first saw it, and I like the fact that he was working the tomes. You got to see like pieces of like Britain, the British Museum, the tomes. You get to, and they didn't make him an archaeologist. They made him a very. They just made him like They made it like the guy who stocked. Like
he's the tour guy.
And he's the tour guy. Yeah.
He's a tour guy.
He's a tour guide who also works at the gift shop. So it's like he's not even an archaeologist, but he knew too much. So he was probably like the guy that like we'll get him for like maybe older people, But it was just, I like the fact that it was just character building, and that's a good thing about that show. You should start if you're not sure about people knowing your character or even knowing the material. You start that off. You start off with a character origin story, but very quickly. And I like that few minutes of it
Yeah,
towards the
because
end, towards the end, you're like, okay, why he woke up? Why is he sleepwalking? And then it goes into like this build up.
so really what we get is that we get a character that's first of all likable. Stephen Grant is a very likable character where Mark is not.
Oh,
So
that's
that's the first thing. If the show would have introduced us to Mark first, who is the actual character, he is Marc Spector. Stephen Grant is a person in his head. Um, then it probably wouldn't be the same. In fact, it wasn't. It wouldn't be the same. It would have been like, he's a mercenary. He's a hired gun because that's what Marc Spector is. He's a mercenary.
he's a bro.
And yeah, so he's not likable. He's not there's a word for it. He's not the guy that you relate to. He's not relatable. Mark's not relatable.
Yeah.
Right? So by introducing us to Steven, he's a little different in the comic books. He's not really the same in the comic books. But that's the catch with Moon Knight in particular, because let's face it, he's a B-list, C-list character in the comics. You have the liberties of pretty much doing whatever you want with him. And you're not going to get a lot of people angry. The other thing is that Moon Knight doesn't have, that Batman does, he doesn't have a rogue gallery. And that's something that's very noticeable in this series.
I thought you were going to say he doesn't have money.
Well, that's another thing altogether. But
Marc Spector has money.
Marc Spector has money, but
you don't want to know where he gets it from.
Right?
And then the reason why he doesn't have a rogues gallery.
So we get these characters. We learn about the character of Stephen Grant. We learn how he is. We learn that he's a sad dude, man. Let's just face it. He's a sad dude. He doesn't have a lot of confidence in himself. But he is part of a group, and there's all this thing about this scarab that he finds, right? The scarab is the MacGuffin of this series, right? The scarab is like a compass in this series. So he finds the scarab, and we get introduced. The series actually opens up really with the character of Harold, Arthur Harrow. That's how it opens up. It opens up with this character by Ethan Hawke, who has the glass in his shoes, and he's constantly feeling pain, right? Hi. So he's feeling this pain. From the comic book series, Arthur Harrow is in one comic book. So Marc Spector's been around for about almost 40 years now. And Arthur Harrow has been around for only one issue. That's how much liberty they took with this series, to know that there's not a rich history in Moon Knight. Not a lot of people know Moon Knight like that. Look for your favorite comic book guy before this series and say, who's your favorite character? They probably won't be able to tell you Moon Knight. They will tell you Moon Knight's cool, right? Because he is still a cool character, but they don't know much about him. Even the personality parts, not everybody knew about it. But Arthur Harrow is a character that in the comic books was just a one-hit wonder. He never returned. And now he's a thing, and he's a cult leader, right? So, but there's something interesting about this guy, is the way he talks, the way he acts, and the way his charisma. But he's damaged, and he knows he's damaged, and he sees himself as being a damaged figure. So, Achilles, what was your take on Harrow, and what did you think about this particular villain of our series? Because he was the villain of our series.
I think that one of the things they did that was really smart was that they, if you're going to have one villain throughout the season, is that you can't make him super evil, diabolical, destructive right off of the bat. So he was also a mystery. Stephen Grant, at least that's how, for me not having read the comics, was introduced. Like, so Stephen Grant, Moon Knight, that's a mystery. Who is he? What's going on with him? But then Harrow, I'm like, well, why would anyone walk around with glass in their shoe? Okay, let's just start with that. So like, and for him, I was like, is he a villain? because it looked like he had the justice scales to decide if someone deserved, to live or die. So that wasn't an automatic evil villain type thing from what I saw. So I liked how they set up with him all the way throughout the season. That he was complex.
Yeah, he was not your typical villain. He was not one-dimensional. He was a villain. Let's just face it. He was the villain of the story. It was obvious he was the villain, and he did have bad intentions for certain things.
Let's say if he's the villain, but he didn't think he was the villain.
He didn't think himself as villain. He didn't think of himself.
Right, which to me is also like Magneto never thinks that he's a villain. He just thinks he's right. So I think that makes for a great villain in and of itself, is that he really believes in what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Thanos thought he was doing the right thing.
Hey, Thanos was right in some things. Let's just say that much, okay? I'll leave it at that. Yeah, what was your thoughts, Andrew, on Harrow?
All I gotta say is bravo to Ethan Hawke. I'm just gonna say he took a character that's not recognizable and made it his own. And what we do is what I thought what he did was he just followed a lot of megalomaniac / kind of like what's it called, like Jim Jones kind of characters. He pretty much just studied those type of people and then brought it into that role. Like, you're a cult leader with magical powers, so in a way the way he influenced people was through generosity and acts of kindness. You don't think of him as a villain. You just think of him as a very eccentric man who had like a belief. So almost like the classic Christ-like figures you have in villains who are like that. Like Ra's al Ghul is very like that. So I was like, holy crap, this is like a Ra's. He basically took like a Ra's al Ghul style personality and made it his own. Yeah. Offering eternal life, offering he personified a character that was not intentionally for this character. And I think that's exactly what he did. He was like, okay, I don't like when you told me his name, I researched him really quickly, and it's like, yeah, Ethan Hawke just said, yeah, whatever that guy is, I'm going to make him my own. Because that's what he did. Because I looked at it and I'm like, yeah.
It's not the same guy.
It's not the same guy. So he pretty much, so yeah, kudos to Ethan Hawke to take a character. No, it was like, I'm going to do my own thing. These are going to be my talking points. Like, a good actor would like try to find something else. And I think that's why I like this character. And I liked his villain character because he's not a villain. He's a freedom fighter. He's a savior style character. So
it's almost like when they call a character like the Punisher an anti-hero or something like that. He's almost like an anti-villain in that way. Right? Yeah. So it's like he himself is not a villainous person, I'll say. His intentions are villainous, but he himself is not that type of person. In fact, he feels like he's irredeemable, which is a character trait that you see throughout the story. Like, with the exception of one episode where he was like, when he was throwing Moon Knight under the bus. He was throwing Marc Spector under the bus when they were having the council and stuff. And he was like, yes. And then you could see it. He was like, I got you. That was when, like, his only real villainous moment, I'll say, which I think that felt a little out of character personally. Let's go into the second episode. The second episode is titled, I love the title of the second episode, Summon the Suit. Let's talk first about Khonshu, because I know you want to talk all day about Mr. Knight. But let's first talk about Khonshu, because Khonshu, he's in the first episode, but he's like this figure that Steve is just seeing in spots, and he's scared to death of him, rightfully so. I see this giant skeleton head of a bird stalking me. I'm gonna be freaking out too. So I'm gonna go with Achilles first, because I want Andrew to talk to me about Mr. Knight. So Achilles, what was your take on Khonshu?
Well, for Khonshu, I don't know exactly what it looked like in the comics. If Do you have
Pretty much the same. He looks the same.
Looks the same. Yeah.
It's exactly.
Good job.
From a visual standpoint, whoever created that look, kudos to them, because it is hard to come up with any kind of superhero villain look, creature, anything these days where they have a distinct look. So I liked the look of him, the height, he looked threatening, he looked old, looked like a mummy, twisted and so forth. So I liked that. I liked the voice. I wasn't wild about the way he spoke, as in a very casual tone. He didn't sound like someone that was thousands of years old in my mind, kind of a thing. No, I don't think he's supposed to, but so in my mind, I wasn't sure, is he a god? Is he just something that Stephen Grant had conjured up in his head, like an imaginary thing, but I thought he was the villain. I honestly I didn't necessarily believe that Harrow was a villain. I thought that this was the villain. For me, in the first 2-3 episodes, that's where my mind was at.
Yeah. So knowing what I know about Kanju, because I went in knowing about Kanju. Kanju is, if everyone wants to call that Moon Knight is Marvel's answers to Batman, Kanju's Marvel's answer to the Spectre.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So DC Spectre is the spirit of vengeance. Kanju is pretty much exactly the same thing. He is the god. He is a god. He's an Egyptian god, and he's the Egyptian moon god, and his thing is to attract vengeance to those who deserve it. Right. So that's his code. Right. So that's why him and Mark were so good, because Mark being the mercenary, Mark will do his bidding. Because he again, the whole concept of an avatar. He needs an avatar to do the work. So as powerful he is,
something I wasn't quite understanding was that Kanju himself, the entity, cannot kill a human. He needs an avatar to do it.
He needs an avatar to do a lot of the work.
He could kill a human. He just freaks them out and let them jump off the buildings and stuff like that. That's how.
But that's
a weird thing. That's a weird thing.
But he won't take this weapon that he has right there, right?
He'll have a human do it. Yeah.
Yeah, he has to have an avatar to do the work. But he'll freak you out, like Andrew said.
Yeah, I mean, I'd jump if I saw that thing coming after me.
What made Kanju was what I liked about Kanju. I actually did like Kanju because he was very sarcastic with him, and it was something that you don't see a godlike character in a show or a movie. They're usually like above that, and he was like always being sarcastic, especially when there was moments that he was talking to Steve and he was like, I don't want to talk to you, give me Mark.
He would say things like, oh, the idiot's back, and I was
which is awesome. I loved it. I love the way he would act around them, because he really didn't care. He was emotionless. He's the type of character that really doesn't care about if he hurts your feelings or not, right? And what was very interesting about he was not trustworthy, which is another thing that's interesting. So he would say things that, being that he's a god, he shouldn't be lying to you, right? But he's gonna say things to kind of like manipulate you. So he was a manipulator, and yes, he was very villainous. Where Arthur wasn't, he was. It still is, because the series is not
so
over.
That's and so for me then, going into it, I'm like, Kanju, I'm starting to understand he's a little not trustworthy, emotionless, blah blah. And then you have Harrow, who says, yeah, I used to work for this guy, but I left. That sounds like somebody who said, this boss is corrupt, I'm not going to work for him anymore, I'm going to do my own thing. So that's why I while I thought Harrow was not the bad one. I really thought it was Kanju.
You can tell that Harrow really, the reason why Harrow the way he is because Kanju really screwed us up.
Yeah, he messed him up.
Yeah, he messed him up. And I'm like, oh, poor. Here's the thing, like when I saw Kanju when he first came out, it was so crazy. Like it kind of is almost like that Broadville horror entrance, like, running away from the hall, and you're like, and of course Steven pretending to be like the girl who drops her shoe while she's running away from the bad guy. I'm laughing my ass off because I know what this guy, like, I already know this thing, but it's like, yeah, if I saw this, I'll be freaking the F out. I'll be running so far away.
Especially in the storage unit.
Yeah, and he's like, no, I'm here to help you. Yeah, right. Bye. It's like, kept running. I was like, God.
So let's go into this because I want to get to the Mr. Knight part of it all. So in this scene we have Kanju, and Kanju leads us to Mr. Knight because he tells Steve and Mark, summon the suit. Apparently there's a thing that you could summon the suit and then you become Moon Knight, right?
Yeah.
So he tells them, summon the suit. So Steve summons the suit, and it's literally a suit, which gives us our first appearance to a character I was not familiar with, because Mr. Knight's a character I actually thought Mr. Knight was very different than what he turned out to be in the show. So tell me a little bit about Mr. Knight, Andrew, and what you know about Mr. Knight.
Okay. When I read the Mr. Knight comic, when he was Mr. Knight, it's like he was a man of the town. It pretty much, if a guy had no confidence, you put on that super suit and you get a suit of armor, but it's like a guy who's never dressed well, who's never. It's kind of like
Johnny Walker or something like that.
Johnny Walker, but no, more like Jerry Lewis. I swear to God, remember that movie, the absent-minded professor, or the flubber? But
no, wasn't it Nutty Professor? It was Nutty Professor, wasn't it?
It was Nutty Professor. Yes, it was like Nutty. Thank you. It was Nutty Professor, and it's like it's kind of like a Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Well, man, if a guy wore a suit, especially if it was a prime suit, he's going to act different. And when Steve became Mr. Knight, oh, he act different. He was like man of the town. I'm here to party. Look at me. Oh my God, I am the all the paparazzi love me kind of character. And it's hilarious that he gets into like this really cool role of like this old 60s, like the old 60s Nutty Professor. And so like when you watch this character like then beat up somebody, it's all suave. It's sophisticated, and he's also trying to like, hey, how you doing, honey? Like, it's one of those like really cool how to be a gentleman character. He's like basically a gentleman's character, and then all of a sudden you take it off. He's just like a really nerdy guy. It really is the Nutty Professor, and I like the fact that you kind of see that. Where he's like, okay, so now, I actually like this, and he's like, oh no, and even Khonshu was like, no, even Khonshu was like, I don't want to work with this guy. Even he knew, like it's kind of like it's amazing. Where sadly it's because I'm the only. I'm not sure you guys should really read the book. It's really hilarious, and of course Mark in that comic book is just like Mark in the show. He's like, really? Is this where is this what you want to be? Is this like, so it's like you have two sarcastic older brothers and a father saying, oh God, so it's like, it's like a slap in the head. Like, really, dude, this is what kind of character you are. Like, this is what kind of superhero you are. And it's good for people to read those type of characters, because if you want to compare him to it's like if Bruce Wayne got himself a suit. So it's like, Bruce Wayne is the suit, and it's like Moon Knight is Batman. They're both superheroes. So it's kind of like it works on his split personalities. So it's kind of like a micro split personality where the personality who is very like not secure of himself become secure. So it's like another alternate reality, another alternate personality. I'm sorry, not reality, alternate personality. Very strange. The book is very strange, and as you can see in the show, it's very strange. He doesn't have like four personalities. He has the personalities and the suit's personalities. That's how the comic book perceived it. It's really good. It's really good.
Yeah. So we're going to go into the third episode, which I think the third episode is probably the weakest of all the episodes. But it has its purpose. This is where we get introduced to Mark's wife, Layla, and Layla is not aware of who Steven is in any way. Steven has never been revealed to Layla. So Layla brings us back and really brings us into knowing who Mark is. So Mark and Layla, they're married, but of course, like any married couple in a TV show, they got their problems and stuff like that. And then we find out that they got even more problems that you could even imagine. But this is the episode where it turns into a treasure, what I say, national treasure type of thing going into the Mummy, right? This is when we start getting into like that thematic Indiana Jones Mummy, but dealing with this split personality. We haven't even talked about in the first episode. I almost forgot about the cupcakes. Remember the cupcakes in the chase?
Yeah.
I forgot about that. That was awesome. That felt like so long ago, but I would love to talk about it, but I think we don't got the time. So this particular episode called The Friendly Type. Episode 3 is when they go in and they learn more about what these Egyptian gods are all about. And we get this scene with them all talking, and we're going to get into a trial for Khonshu, and everything here in this particular thing. What did you guys think about this episode? Because personally, I thought this was the weakest of all the episodes.
I mean, for me, this is where at episode 3 of a 6-episode season, I'm not expecting that episode to be super like strong and tight or whatever. There's a lot of getting from the beginning towards the end that has to happen in 3 and 4. So I understood that, so but to me, the question became, who is Moon Knight? You weren't getting him running around in that costume very much at all. There was so much about him that I did not understand. And I felt that the mystery was becoming greater without any answers. I understand the genre for a mystery. Like, let's say the show Lost, at least in the beginning half of that whole series, it was like for every time you answer a question, you have 5 more questions you want to get, but you have to keep giving them answers to some level. So here with episode 3, I was really starting to get confused as to like what is the show. So that for me, I thought was problematic. They bring in Layla without the wife and so forth, so that had all kinds of questions, and she had questions about him. Steven had questions what was going on. So I felt that this episode was the most confusing.
Yeah. What about you, Andrew? What do you think?
You know what? It was one of those episodes where I just like, okay, you introduced the wife character really quickly and then just dropped it and then like came. Yeah, it's pretty much was a quick edit. I got to the point where I was like, okay, go on with the story already. Like this is the episode where I thought it may have been a weak series. If it didn't get better, I thought, okay, we're just going to go downhill from here.
Now, did you say this was the episode that had that trial where Mark has to speak as the voice for Khonshu?
Yeah. I think, and I was like, even that felt like rush because that should have been a grandiose. That should have been more grandiose. You're talking about the hidden chamber in the Gaza pyramids. That's like almost every episode of like Ancient Aliens. I mean, that should have been like a kind of a moment. It was just like, okay, it's there. It's in the Great Pyramids. Like,
okay,
really?
Well, I rewatched episodes 1 through 5 right before watching the finale, right?
Yeah.
And rewatched it. That trial, I'm like, wait a minute. When Mark says to Khonshu, so are we just going to go to this trial thing with sword? And Khonshu's like, we have to go there with like irrefutable proof of what Harrow's up to and blah blah blah. He says that to him, like, you can't just go to this trial with nothing. You got to go with some proof, right? But then when the trial happens, Khonshu and all his claims go nowhere, but Harrow turns around and says, this guy's unstable, this guy's this. Harrow had all the proof. I'm like, so the writing to me seemed odd. I was like, the exact opposite of what was supposed to happen happened.
The only thing I will say that is the saving grace about this particular episode, again, it wasn't that it was a bad episode. It was
rushed.
Even I don't know about even rush. I think it could have been even rusher, if that says, because of what we lost, what we were losing in the last episode. If you cut this episode, I would have gotten more of the last episode. That's what I'm thinking. I'm fine with, and I would have been fine. The one thing that's the saving grace to me about this episode was at the end when Khonshu decides to turn back time. Where that was cool. That was cool, and he does say something to Steven where he says, "Tell Mark to save me." Where he's like, "I'm gonna be imprisoned, so you got to help me."
But also, you got to see like real magic and like real Marvel magic. That's we don't get to see like Marvel except for like Doctor Strange, but this was like real magic that was happening. That the gods could literally move the heavens and the earth just to find a star that looked like just like the star from the map. So it was like Indiana Jones. Oh, we have we have this app. No, apps could be wrong. Okay, I'll just move the sky. And that was just like,
the moving of the sky like this. I said, you know what? I have to applaud them because it's hard to get a visual that people can sit there and say, oh yeah, I remember seeing that on this other thing or whatever. That really was it was like kind of like a breakthrough from a visual standpoint. Like I hadn't seen that kind of thing done before. It was really, really cool.
It kind of looked like the Earth had a ring, like a Saturn's ring, like the whole thing. I was like, holy!
That was your Superman moment, right?
Right. So we lost Lois Lane.
So let's move forward. Let's move forward to our next subject, because this is the next episode is labeled The Tomb. This episode was the episode that I think everybody stopped, right? Because the beginning of the episode was the continuation of everything of what happened with Khonshu, the trial, and everything that goes along with that. And this was straight out of the Mummy. The first 40 minutes of this episode was straight out of the Mummy. Everything about it was the Mummy, and everything that was happening about the Mummy. And it's, you had that one moment where Layla's hiding from this dead creature or whatever that was, and she's just there like, I'm like, you're breathing so hard he can't hear you.
Oh, I mean, well, you always have to wonder. Some zombies can only smell, some zombies can only hear, some zombies can only eat. Yeah.
But he was working. He works, though.
This one knew before.
And it's a continuation of what was going on with episode 3. But what really, really stood out was that moment where they supposedly kill Mark. And in killing Mark, wakes him up in a psychiatric ward. This is the moment where I go, what the hell just happened? Because then you see all these characters in this show. Everybody's a character in the ward. So he sees his boss from the museum. He sees Layla. He sees the orderlies who were the police officers that were knocking at his door. Right? When this episode happened, it was crazy because he goes to it. Now, refresh my memory. It was Steve, was it? It wasn't Mark. Right? It was Steve.
What I love about it was Steve was like, this was another Steve episode where he got to flex his like knowledge of like when you're knowledgeable of something. Like Mark was like, okay, this is more of a Steve thing, and he wakes up Steve to figure out that the whole tomb looked like the Eye of Horus. Straight out, right in my jam, Dungeons and Dragons style kind of stuff. Yeah, that's straight up my jam. I was like, okay.
And Layla was like leaning in, like, oh, he's so sexy, so brainy.
Yeah, and she actually sees like the beauty of the man. Like she actually sees the what makes him attractive. What I love about it is Then Marvel decides to just go, oh yeah, we're going to mention something that is still happening. Like there, we don't know where Alexander the Great's tomb is. Oh yeah, and by the way, he has to put his hand into the mouth of Alexander the Great just to get the statue of Ammit that he had in his. So you have to think of, well, he was a great speaker. Oh, I don't want to go into his mouth. And he's like, and he's like putting his like. So it's like the most like. No,
it was pretty gross.
It was pretty gross as a scene, but it's so done. Like whoever wrote that must have played Dungeons and Dragons when they were a kid, and this was like the scene. Like if I ever get an Egyptian scene, I want to have like the tomb was beautiful.
Yes.
Everything was like from the tomb to like them jumping from platform to platform, getting away from this monster. Harold appearing out of nowhere. And then all of a sudden, it's like, where are you from? And then all of a sudden, he shoots him. And you're like, right now, I would have been like, me, if I was creating that episode, credits. No, it didn't stop from there. He wakes up and he's like, where am I? It's like.
He's in a mental institution.
In a mental institution. I'm like, I actually paused. I was like, wait, did I go to another episode? Because I swear to God, that's what happened to me. Like, all right, 1 minute you're in an Egyptian tomb, now you're in a mental institution. I was like, what the hell's going on? So you got me invested.
Okay,
like
I'm the mental institution scene. Before we get into that, because of course it's a standalone, fantastic beauty of everything coming together just right. But up until that point, that show episode 4, I'm like, is this Moon Knight or is this Indiana Jones? Because I was like. The only time I saw Moon Knight really doing much of anything in episodes 3 and 4 was when he's in that like Egyptian rodeo thing of whatever you want to call it, jousting, and they stick 3 giant poles through him, which now I don't even understand. Like, okay, now I see Moon Knight, and I don't understand who he is even more now because. And then my friend, there was a big debate between the two of us. He's like, but he's like, you don't need to understand his powers. I said. Because they keep saying it's healing. I said, there's a difference between healing and you walking around with 3 poles stuck through you and still going ahead and fighting. Wolverine, you take the stuff out and then it heals. Fine. Take these poles out of Moon Knight, then it heals. But how can you function so you don't have any organs? I said, it's not a question of what I like and don't like. I said, I'm confused. And I don't think anyone in the audience should be confused with something as basic as Moon Knight. So the mental asylum scene, when it came up, was so great. I was willing to forgive everything up until then.
Because it felt like a dream.
Yeah.
But I was like, this show is not named, then don't call it Moon Knight. Call it the new
Marc Spector
Jones. Because they're doing it well. That
you're right.
zombie thing and all the stuff that they show with the tomb, like you said, the set, the props, all of it was so beautiful. It's better than some actual movies that get released into the theater, and in terms of the production value. It was beautiful. But I was like, I just don't understand how this is Moon Knight.
Yeah, it's like it's beautiful, but so what? It kind of I think that's where a lot like what you're saying. Because when he got stuck with the 3 poles, the man in my head was like, is he kind of like a zombie too? Like, is he like also dead? And he's not regeneration. Moon Knight is actually a dead person already. Like this is what I was thinking because he had gapes, but there was no blood.
Well, I mean, and my friend said, well, I just thought it was cool. I said, but you have to understand from a storytelling aspect, where is the suspense in any battle of Moon Knight if you know that he can still fight with 3 poles stuck in him?
He's indestructible, pretty much.
So are you really going to be worried about him? That it takes away a lot from the Superman stuff, right? Like, if you know that he's that strong, then why am I worried about him if he's in the street fighting these crazy demonic dogs and stuff like that, if this is something that he can accomplish?
Well, that's the point of it. I think, and that's the point why they stood clear from actually having the Moon Knight character and focus more on the Steve and Mark character. Because Steve and Mark are very much part of the Moon Knight lore. And and I think if they ever decide to do a second season or they put him in some movie, we'll get more of the Moon Knight character. I think that's the possibilities. But I'm with you on it. It's like, I thought the same thing. I was like, did they just kill him? No. But when they do shoot him and he ends up in the insane asylum, it changes everything, and it changes your perspective on what's going on, because then you start seeing this whole new story unfold, which is taken directly from the Jeff Lemire storyline. If you ever read the Jeff Lemire story, it's taken entirely from it, where you don't know is what just happened all real or fake, especially since all the characters are people from the other part of the story. From, Layla's there. You had Harrow is his professor, his therapist, who I love the Ned Flanders joke that he did on him, right? But then you start realizing there's something more to this, because he's Stephen Grant, and he comes up and he sees this sarcophagus, right? This tomb, and opens it up, and it's Mark coming out of it. So at that moment when you saw Mark is when you said there's something up here, because it's not that he's in a ward. There's something going on internally, and is he going into an afterlife?
Yeah.
And that's that moment that you start realizing. But at the same time, they still play with it in the sense that, is this in fact actually real or not?
Did you notice the guy's desk? There was a white statue of Ammit.
Oh, there was a whole bunch of stuff going on,
right? So I was looking at it. I was like, there's a lot of because it was it was telling you that it was the office was telling you that it was a tomb without telling you it was a tomb. Mm-hmm. Like the walls were broken. You have columns sticking out. I don't know where we go where Egyptian columns are being stuck out, where bricks are being hidden. Mm-hmm. I saw Aramette statue on his, okay, so that's Aramette trying to talk to him about his death. She's trying to convince him, because now you're in her realm, and so she's trying to convince him to die, and that whole hearts thing, the whole balancing of the heart. Oh my God! After I think that was the next episode.
That's the next episode. Before we go there,
but no, yeah. But when you see them running, and this is my favorite scene, and you kind of see one screaming, "Oh!" and then of course the other guy screaming, "Ah!" It was
and what was so perfect about it, and you got to give Oscar Isaac credit for his acting chops here. This is the perfect moment where you say Stephen and Mark are two separate people, right? It's the same actor playing it, but he's playing it so different that even their mannerisms are different.
They both run differently when they're running the thing. Each
just
one
look at how they're screaming right now. I could tell which one's Steve and which one's Mark, because Steven is a little more frightened than Mark is, right? You can see it in his face. Mark is he's freaked out with what he's seeing, but not the same way Steven is. Look at Steven, how he has his hands up. That is perfect acting. That is the type of acting that gets you awards. You know what I mean?
I'm going to tell you right now, him and the girl who's in Orphan Black, I want to see more of those guys doing alternate personality things. Because again, it just their acting range was Oscar Isaac. After watching this scene, I was and then also it's he's a brother of mine. He's a twin of mine. They actually did fall the good twin, bad twin kind of thing. Yeah. I like that. I really did.
So this episode leads us. There's so much mysteries in this episode, but it's the episode that makes you say, okay, now I got to see what's going on next. They left me off that cliffhanger, right? And the cliffhanger really was what they're seeing at this moment, which is, hi. I just stood there all right, we just went to the weird. All right, this is did he just go into the multiverse? That's what I was thinking to myself, right? Where you see this character, Tawit, I might be messing up her name, who is now she's another Egyptian goddess with a hippopotamus head, because they're all animals here. They're all anamorphic characters. And it is now clear that he is now in the afterlife. We have now confirmed that he's in the afterlife. But at the same time, we're still wondering what's going on. And it's through this episode we're starting to really learn something with this episode called Asylum, where the beginning of this episode is really them talking about this, but it's now a journey into his past. And this has got to be the most heart-wrenching episode out of all of them. For me, this is the best episode. this is the episode that made this show from good to better. This episode, which is Asylum, this is where we get to learn about what actually, made him go through this DID, this disorder that he has, because it was spawned by his death of his brother, who he's partially to blame for it, and then worse is his abusive mother, who blamed him for that death. And as a result, he develops this dissociate identity disorder, which we learned that Stephen Grant is a coping mechanism for Marc Spector.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts, Achilles? What's your thought as a writer? I have to go to you as a writer, thinking about this particular
well, I would
episode.
say from a writing standpoint, fully supported by the directing, the acting, the show itself. This was the strongest emotional content that the MCU has put out, and it was really, really strong. So I loved the episode. I loved the storytelling. The acting was top notch. It was also where I surrendered the idea that this was a show called Moon Knight, and decided that this may as well, for let's say the character of Moon Knight is the equivalent of what the TV show Gotham was for Batman. It's all the setup of how it came to be. That I was like, Gotham. You're not going to expect to see Batman, but there's the villains, there's this, how it came to be. So I kind of decided this is what it's going to be like for as far as Moon Knight goes. It was, but because it's elevated so much and brought all these elements and answered a lot of the questions of the mystery and so forth, the setup for what would be episode 6 was really, really strong, really high. And I thought that the expectation for 6 was, anyone was like, I had high hopes for episode 6. Well, with good reason, because this episode was fantastic. I'm not sure what you guys think as far as the rating goes. What do you think that this was something that a 10-year-old should watch?
That's a good question.
No, man. No.
It is the type of question that, as a parent, it depends. It depends on what you want to teach your child. It is definitely an episode you shouldn't. I would say it's probably an episode that you might have to have a conversation afterwards to discuss about the disorder in general, because it's so emotional. Because as a TV show,
let me put it to you this way: let's suppose that you watched episode 1 and 2 with your kid, and then you're traveling around, so forth. You're a journalist, and your kid's just going to watch the rest of these shows on his or her own, and then watches this on their own. That was the only thing, because it's Disney Plus. Mm-hmm. This isn't something in the theater. So with Disney Plus, I just wonder, people go with the presumption that Disney is a family brand.
I always felt like Disney was a conservative family brand.
Sure, that also. So it just surprised me that this was Netflix. You look at The Punisher and Daredevil and the content and Luke Cage, different story. But for Disney Plus, this episode, it was really well done. I'm just wondering what you guys thought of the rating for it.
Like I said, it pushed into freeform territories. Like, have you ever seen any shows on Freeform? Freeform does touch on those things. Those are for teens. So you're really seeing a show that grew up. Like right now, I don't see kids playing with Moon Knight toys. After this episode, I don't see anything of that nature. It really was like kind of like from like a kind of a hokey teen Indiana Jones to like, then you see the really nitty gritty of Marc Spector. So like, if it was going to go into like this, they did actually have an additional disclaimer. I actually checked it out. There was an additional disclaimer in the episode for reasons. I'm going to tell you right now, like when I saw like he's like, you do not want to go in there, Steve, and you do not want to go into that room. And I was like, oh no, like, what are you doing, Disney? What are you doing, Disney? What are you doing?
Oh, that scene in that cafeteria with all those dead bodies, that was freaky.
Oh, I was like, oh my God, that was like, who are these? Like, these are the people I killed. And I'm like, this is a Disney show. What the hell?
But to their defense, they added that parental thing right before the show.
Yeah,
That's how we got all the Netflix shows on Disney.
Yeah.
But I don't feel, mind you, I don't even have kids, but I don't feel that that's necessarily fair in the sense that you put that in front of episode 5, but you don't have that for episode 1, 2, and 3. So why would a parent say, "Oh yeah, watch 4, 5, and 6. I'll catch up with you later on because you're going to be at your mom's house instead of mine." You know, that sort of thing. So to put it in front of the 5th one, then it's expecting a lot for that parent to then be sitting there at the beginning of every single episode.
Okay, what's really cool, I want to say what's really cool, you actually find out Marc Spector's heritage. You find out his Jewish heritage. You find out where is he from. You find out that he's just he was an abused child. You found out that he had a father that was pretty, let's just say, overprotective of either the mom's feeling or not, or withdrawn to the fact that he didn't want to acknowledge that the mother had these disturbed feelings. Like he knew to, so it was kind of like, like usually it's like the reverse kind of thing where you see in stories where it's usually the father who's the abusive one. No, this is the complete opposite where you actually have an overbearing matriarch. And I was like, okay, you're going there, Disney. So like usually usually you have that vanilla route where you go, yeah, it's the dad who's always the weird one. No, it was the mom who was the weird one. It was the mom who had the issue. It was you see him growing up in an ordinary family, and then is that also the same episode where you revealed that where Steven keeps waking up and talking to somebody on the phone, and he's not talking to anybody.
You found out that it was all in
yeah. And so this is where he's talking to his mother throughout the whole show, and then you find out he's not talking to anyone. So,
but you knew there was something up in the first episode because there was in the very first episode when you see him take the phone and you see him talking to his mother. First of all, you know it's his mother. Second of all, there was something odd about it because he talked throughout the whole thing, and he never gave that person an opportunity to speak on the other line. So
I thought he was leaving a voicemail.
Well, because he was actually there was moments where he was actually talking, and his mind was messing with him to the point that he thought he was actually talking to her.
Right. So when you got that realization, you're like, wait, in episode 1 and 2, he was. He called his mom. Hey, I'm not. I'm in, when he woke up in what's his name? When he woke up at that German / town where all the cupcakes were being thrown everywhere, he called his mom. Like, where am I? What am I doing here? And like all of a sudden, like people start shooting at him, and he's running away with his phone.
Yeah,
I was like,
the other thing, what was also interesting about this episode as well is we learned that. First of all, the character of Steven was created as a child when he was a child. In the scene that we're seeing here. So as he was a child, shortly after the death of his brother, he created Stephen Grant based off of a poster. So Stephen Grant ended up being what the character that will take care of his fears, even though Stephen Grant's a kind of, his characterization is that of a measly, kind of guy.
Yeah,
but
short round style character.
Yeah, short.
Like Indiana Jones. It's kind of weird, yeah.
But what was very interesting for me in particular is that when they were at their mom's wake and he's outside having his drinks, that's when Steven took over.
Yeah.
So before all that, Marc was still in control. He'll allow Steven to take, to come out, but it was more of a coping mechanism. But when his mom died, it led him to give Steven full control to the point that Marc, at that time, after that, Marc was gone, and Steven was fully inhabiting the body, and that was just a few weeks before the first episode.
Yeah, what I love about it also, it's all happening on this ship, sailing through the lands of the dead. Your hearts are being measured, and throughout that whole time, that's happening, this little talk, all these encounters that's happening, you're literally in the background hearing the scales going back and forth, which I thought was brilliant. You just heard it orderly, Like you hear the scales trying to, and then you actually see it. Like, of course, because everyone knows in the book of the dead, if you want to pass through the Egyptian afterlife, your heart has to be weighed by a feather, and then of course you wake up in like what we call it Elysium or. So he was trying to get like the I forgot the name of the hippopotamus god. It's just her name is
Tawit.
Tawit. Yeah, Tawit. Like I think I'm saying it wrong. Anybody?
We'll probably go far.
Yeah, Egyptologists don't come and like try to kill me or anything or kill us in the comments. But I'm terribly sorry. I even think probably Disney got it wrong too. Whatever. But I'm like, I love the fact that you actually see this kind of cool journey story. And while all this is happening, then you get to see Mark, what happened to Mark when he grew up. And it seems like he was being manipulated. And even what carried him from as a child also carried out as a man. Mm-hmm. And it seemed like Steve was put away, which is the craziest thing. Like Steven is just away. Like he's not there anymore. So he is coping somehow with all this. And then Khufu came like, while it's cool is like that scene where he went into the pyramid, pyramid of, I think it's called the pyramid of the moon or something like that. Mm-hmm. It has this grandiose name. I forgot the name of it. But you see him in the tomb. He's bleeding, and it's straight out of the comic book. He looks at the statue, and of course, he appears and gives him like hey, you want to die or you want to be my avatar? Yeah. Exactly. I kind of dig that whole scene. But it man, was sad. Yeah, it's kind of sad. Like you're like, dude, this kid who grew up to cope, he literally was so infatuated with the show. It's like me. It's like if you get hurt, you pretend to be Short Round from Indiana Jones. And that's the cool thing. Like Indiana Jones was like really pronounced in this damn in this show. And I think because it's like for us 80s kids, I think like when we think of like anything like Egypt, we think Raiders. That's all it is. We think Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Raiders, the Goonies.
Yeah, and then oh man, it was just so cool.
Yeah,
but it was sad.
Let's start getting ready to get to the last episode because we're actually
we're up to the hour. Yeah.
So we get to this point, and Steven saves Mark, and it's interesting because Steven is the wholesome character of the two, right? But because of their split personality, they weren't able to balance. So the minute he loses Steven, Mark scales balance, and he's entered into the field of reeds, which is pretty much that version of heaven.
Yep.
Which leads us to the next story, and it leads us to episode 6, the final episode. And here is where, in one episode, they try to tie the knot for a lot of things, and I think that's where they messed up. Instead of they let other parts breathe. This episode was not allowed to breathe, where there was too much going on. Layla is Layla frees Khonshu, and Khonshu's like, you need to be my avatar because Harold released Ammit, right? Harold went ahead and he released Ammit, and she was an interesting character, right? The crocodile lady. In the comic book, she was actually the psychiatrist that Mark was talking to in the comic book. So,
okay.
In the comic book, she was, and so that's why there was some dynamic with her and Harold. But what was interesting about Harrow, and this is one of those moments where I was like, this is why I really dig Harold's character, is because he was like, I'm undeserving. You shouldn't pick me. I'm not worth it. And she was like, but you're serving me, but you're doing this. Like she was forgiving him when he couldn't forgive himself. Yeah, which was crazy, right? Especially the type of character.
Think about it, yeah. Right? I forgive you your sins, yeah. Kind of, J.O., yeah. I forgive you of your sins, but kill for me. It's like
exactly. and so while that's going on, Harold releases her she's taking up all the souls of all the people in the area, and she just gets big. And it only took her 5 souls to make her into this huge Kaiju character. So Layla has to release. She has to release Kanju, which she does. But Kanju's like, I gotta fight her. And she's like, well, I'm not going to give you my body. She pretty much told him, I don't trust you. I saw what you did to Mark. I don't trust you. I'm not going to do it. And this is where I had a problem. She does that knowing who Kanju is. So I get that part. She releases Tawit, and Tawit's like, can you be my avatar? And she was like, oh, maybe it's just for this little while. It's like, all that crap you said about Kanju, what makes you think she's this better?
She was bubbly. I don't know.
Because she had a female voice or something like that?
No, she was
I
bubbly.
gotta trust her.
She was bubbly.
That was problematic to me.
Also, I didn't she mention like her father was proud of her and stuff like that?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm talking to your dad right now, kind of thing. That goes to be kind of manipulative.
But Kanju would do the same thing.
I'd have to watch it again, but I feel like there was something that she had done beforehand. It wasn't necessarily that she saved Layla, but she did something to kind of help her do it. And let's just be real. Layla barely even had much choices to even be turning down Kanju. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't like,
oh yeah, the fate of the world is at stake. I need to take your body. No, I'll do this on my own.
Right. Exactly.
There's a giant alligator.
I think I can handle it.
Eating Egypt. No.
So that was the moment where I was like, you messed this one up. But you give her this nice little falcon-esque character costume, and she becomes the Scarlet Scarab. That's the title. That's the name of the character.
I had to research that character.
Yeah, it's definitely different from the comic books. Yeah. She becomes the Scarlet Scarab, and she immediately becomes a hero, a superhero.
Come on.
But again, all this stuff feels rushed because at the same time, we have Mark and Steve. Mark saves Steve with the help of Tarot, and then they go out and they go have they're going having their superhero fun. He goes, and the best part I thought was really just seeing their interactions together, in which we get a full-blown switch on off battle sequence with Moon Knight and Mr. Knight fighting back and forth. I thought that scene was great.
Yeah.
But I also thought it was problematic because I was like, where did Mr. Knight learn how to fight like that out of nowhere?
I mean,
like I said, it's like a split personality within a split personality.
There was a few leaps in, like, this picture is great. She looked fantastic, and there was another comment that I had heard on a podcast, and I think it's true, that Layla accomplished in one episode to be much more impressive than everything Falcon has ever done up until this point.
Yeah. Oh my God, did she?
I mean, it looked great. She pulls it off, and also the CGI and all that kind of stuff. It was really well done. And Moon Knight, both versions, whether it's this, Stephen or Mark, all that stuff. It did look really good, but it felt rushed in that. All of a sudden, Layla was like, I know these wings. I know exactly how to do it.
She knew how to do everything.
But is that because she's an avatar and therefore she's getting you almost have to like fill in your own blanks here. It's like, the hippo must be helping her.
She was a fighter, and she was like, she.
No, but she was flying around if you told me she had a history of those like things that look like a flying squirrel off of a cliff, and you're like, go with it.
Yeah, it's true.
But she was zipping around with such finesse. I was like, that hippo must be all up in there, like helping her.
And how she become a falcon when this one's a hippo?
Another fantastic question, because I was like, I can't wait, because hippos are my favorite.
It's called Scarlet Scarab. So wouldn't they have scarab wings? But I guess you have like the
with a hippo as your avatar.
Seriously, I was like saying, did she like saw a guy who was probably buried 3 tombs over, called a guy named Apocalypse, and then took his avatar.
Oh, you mean Apocalypse, who happens to look like Oscar Isaac? Huh? I
Right?
wonder
And then
where
all of a
that
sudden, hey,
came from.
look, that's Archangel. That's cool. Let's put the wings on this girl. Like, I'm done with her. But,
So the connections between the Avatar and the gods, I thought this could be tweaked a little bit, because from what I can tell, here's the one that she said, I'm not going to help you, with a giant bird beak. And then when she decides to become something, she's flying around in wings. So she looked more like Khonshu's Avatar than even Moon Knight did. So I just didn't understand how these things were lining up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
Here's the funny thing is, like, there's a scene where, like, she breaks Khonshu, and there's other Egyptian gods imprisoned. Because I was like, wait, so all these other statues are imprisoned gods? Mm. I was like, couldn't she just, like, break some more? Like, we don't know what happened in that scene, Like, we were
like, let me throw this one out. Let me throw this one out.
I mean, if you don't want to reveal something, that's fine. If you don't want to reveal what these other ones are, but at least acknowledge that that's an option. If Mark and Steven are not going to open that third coffin, fine. But give me the reason why they didn't, because he opened up the first one to get Mark out. So now here's another one jumping around.
But Mark was the one
you to open it.
But here's the catch. This is the one thing which, thank you for bringing that up, because that leads us to our final point here, which leads us to the after credits. That coffin had someone in it. And now we know who that someone is. Like, we knew it. For those of us who know, we knew exactly who it was. And Mark knew who it was. So Mark was the one to tell. Because Steven's the figment of his imagination.
Wait a minute.
Mark is the person. Mark knew.
Didn't. But there were 2 fight scenes where Mark and Steven both said, I didn't do it. Neither did I. Well, who was it? I don't know. Neither one of them knew about the third.
Yeah. But while they were in the afterlife, Mark knew there was something up with that guy. So Mark, remember, Mark's the one that creates the character. When you have that disorder, you create whoever this being is. Now you lose sight of what you're doing because of it, and as a result, in the real life, when Mark was switched into Steven, they were not in control. But then they started realizing they were. Who he was turning into actually appeared multiple times in the series. Sometimes he appeared in the dream sequence.
So is this Jake that we're seeing in the middle of the images showing here?
In the images you saw in here, it could very well be Jake, but we don't know. This is Jake. This is Jake right here. Jake Lockley is the third character of Marc Spector.
Holy
Jake Lockley,
crap.
He is the taxi driver in the comics, so therefore that's why he drove the cab. Mm-hmm. He drove the limo, and he is the ruthless one of the bunch.
And he's Latino.
He happens to be Latino, right?
No, but and I just realized something. Mark said to Layla, I didn't kill your father, but I was there.
Yes.
Holy crap. And I was like,
that did it. Yes.
He was the one he did kill his father. She physically was someone else. Physically it's him. Mentally it was him. I was like, what?
Well, and really the murderer of the group is Jake. Jake's the killer.
Because they always reference back to this scene, and he's like, I kind of died, blah blah blah. And he says, and then I woke up and everybody else was dead. Yeah, because Jake killed them all.
Because he has no remorse. And what was interesting was that Khonshu, when he says, you release me, we strike this deal. So we fight, we strike the deal. He was like, yeah, whatever. We'll do it, okay? And it's like, now's the time, my favorite thing was seeing Khonshu like, you want to negotiate now? Like, yeah, let's do it. That was funny. But then Khonshu, being cunning, knows about Jake, so he releases Mark and Steve, but he never released Jake, and Jake actually embraces him.
And Khonshu says something about he doesn't necessarily definitively say that there were only 3. You know what I'm saying? So a 4th, 5th, and 6th or whatever is certainly still a possibility.
It's a possibility if the comics decide to do it, but the comic books always kept to 3.
Yeah, because the comic books, like even in the comic books, there's a famous Spider-Man meme that's going around where Spider-Man's talking to Moon Knight and he's having a conversation with himself.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
like, who am I talking to now? Like, oh, you're talking to me. You're talking.
Well, now a comic book is a little different because when you have, and I've seen this with a few comics, when you have a multiple personality, comic books have very valuable real estate. You can only spend but so much time on each panel with the chit.
Yeah.
Whereas in the TV show, the back and forth can happen like this, and it's a
Yeah.
lot easier to do. But it doesn't quite. It's not. I can see why in the comic they would want to keep it to 3.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. With that being said, it
was
is now
good.
time to rate the show as a whole. We'll do this with a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the best. I'm going to start with Andrew. Andrew, you first give me your ratings and what do you think overall as a whole based on what you
Well,
gathered.
with your ratings, I'm going to give it like a solid 3, 1 through 5. I'll give it a solid 3, leaning on 4. And the reason why I give it a solid 3 is because, 1, I like the story. 2, great visuals. 3, Isaac and the actress who played Layla, her name escapes me. I would like to see more of her in films. They were the 2 strongest characters there. And also Ethan Hawke, to his credit, gave you a good performance even with like a limited amount of material. He gave you a good performance. But it just seemed rushed, and it seemed like towards the end of the show, there is no connection value to any other Marvel franchises except for maybe possibly he'll show up once upon a time. But I like the fact it was a standalone. But that's where it gets me. Like, this is not. It feels like a standalone.
Mm-hmm.
Even with the other shows, because we've had others now. We've had WandaVision. We've had
Okay.
Falcon and Falcon being Captain America. Falcon. You got Hawkeye. Hawkeye was my favorite.
I like Hawkeye.
I'm gonna say Hawkeye's my favorite. Then it becomes Hawkeye or Winter Soldier. Yeah, those 2 are like they keep switching because I keep rewatching them. I don't see rewatchable value in that's another thing. That's one of the reasons why I don't give it a 5. I won't probably ever rewatch this show. Like when you want to rewatch a show, WandaVision, I never rewatched WandaVision. I'll probably never rewatch Moon Knight, and I like the character. So, but yeah, I'll give it a solid 3. I love the fact that they mentioned like a real mystery that's out there. Whatever happened to Alexander the Great's tomb? That's a brilliant real life mystery that people have been trying to, like, real Egyptologists have been trying to find for generations. So yeah, I love the fact that it went into like ancient alien style weirdness of like, but it still was just too much.
Yeah.
With just too small of a frame. And I actually believe maybe because they didn't want that to step on the toes of Doctor Strange. That's probably my
possibly.
Yeah.
Achilles, what about you? What's your ratings for it?
I'll give it a 4. And what would keep it from being a 5 is that it was unfinished. When it ended, I felt like it was unfinished. For the amount of time that we were invested in Layla, we don't even know where she left off. Like legit, we don't know where the character ended up, and we definitely don't know where she ended up as far as where Mark and Steven are concerned. And it's for a last episode that was only 36 minutes. So you can't tell me you didn't even have time to throw that in there. That to me is what I thought would have been an end credit. And a much needed one. So to me that it felt it's that last episode is what I think is what caused it from being a 5 as far as TV shows go, because everything else was really, really top notch acting, storytelling, and everything like that. And for a first season, you know what I'm saying? Like when you come back for a second season, you have a bigger budget. You don't have to do so much exposition on who the character is. So I'd give it a 4.
I loved her. I loved her character. I wanted to see more. And I'm digging the actress. You're right. I wanted more of that actress.
May Kalamawa. Kalamawi, something like that. All right. So here's my ratings. I'll tell you what they are right after I review what I think. So as a show, it was definitely one of my favorite MCU shows, TV shows on Disney Plus. It tackles subject matters that are real to people, but at the same time, it had a lot of things that were very comic booky that I loved. We had a really good villain. This is a good. Arthur Harrow was really a good villain. I don't know what his future holds. The end of the episode 6, made it seem like that Mark actually killed him, but until you see a body, no one's ever really dead, right? So I think Ethan Hawke was fantastic as the character of Arthur Harrow. Honestly, I feel a little different about the Layla character. There was moments where she was really good, but when she was doing the split personality thing with Tower, I wasn't feeling that the same way I was with Mark and Steve. Even though she was still fine and I had no problem with her. The standout will always be Oscar Isaac. Oscar Isaac, he will most doubtly should get an Emmy nomination for this performance. This was a performance that he made 2 characters happen, and now he has to make 3 characters happen. And I think that was the draw of bringing it, what drew him into the character in the first place. When they said, you want to do Moon Knight, you want to do split personalities, he was like, oh, I'm in. Because that's an actor's dream, right? Yeah. So he stole the show. Episode 5 by far was the best episode out of all of the episodes. Episode 6 was the most sloppy of the episodes.
Yeah.
And it's the only reason why I don't give this show a 5 out of 5. So I'm giving it a solid 4 out of 5 Izzies.
Yeah. All right.
It gets 4 out of 5 Izzies because it is still a really good show.
Yeah.
And it's a solid show. It is a show that I would recommend to anybody to watch. I wish I had more Moon Knight, though.
Yeah.
That I wish I had. The actual Moon Knight character I would like to have seen more of, but what I got in return was still worth watching. And if there is a second season, because right now it's known as a limited series and it's going to go in as a limited series. But when we do see him again, because I'm sure we will, I hope we get to explore more of Moon Knight and Mr. Knight. I think we got more Mr. Knight than we got actually Moon Knight.
Yeah, we did.
But I want to see more of the Moon Knight character, and I'm curious to see if they give Jake a character. You know what I mean? Even though in the comic books there's not really a Jake Moon Knight, I'm curious to see if that's going to happen. But for that being said, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5, guys. All right. With that said, guys, as I said, we did it. We did an hour and a half. You guys, I called it. I told you. All right. Let's start with you, Achilles. Where can people find you?
They can find me at planetachilles.com. That's where I have my illustrated books and everything else, artwork, commissions, things like that.
All right. Andrew, what about you, bro?
Finally finished my book with Storm Bunny Studios. Good person named Jason Sonier. He really does great games. So you can find me at Andrew Frank Rodriguez Art. You can find my work now. I'm going to be publishing 2 modules for a Dungeons & Dragons style adventure through Drive-Thru RPG and through DM Labs. So right now I'm officially, I'm not comic books, but now I'm officially more game designer right now, which is, I think you guys know, when I walked in, once upon a time when I met both of you, it's like, what do you want to do? We're like, I would like to make a Dungeons & Dragons book. Well, guys, thank you, both of you. You guys gave me the launching stepping stone. Achilles, I wanted to tell you that too. I give you the mad props because you guys once upon a time saw this really awkward fat guy who just got out of his insurance selling job and said, I'm done selling insurance. I want to make comics. and so right now I'm doing a couple of Dungeons & Dragons books and the funny thing is, you can find me at Andrew Frank Rodriguez Art at Instagram and Facebook group site. I also have a group site where I introduce the games where you want to play the games. It's called Dead Do Walk. It's exclusively my zombie apocalypse RPG site, where if you want to run a zombie RPG, and I have a cat, and if you have the time, and I have the time, we could play some Walking Dead / Nation Z / whatever kind of weird zombie games that and zombie paraphernalia that's out there, because there's so many different types of zombies. Hell, let's have Moonlight zombies, because I just love that little aspect. But yeah, so right now it's Andrew Frank Rodriguez, game designer at or you can find me at Facebook, Andrew Frank Rodriguez Art, or you can find me on Instagram, Frank Rodriguez. And check out Storm Bunny Studios.
Awesome. Let me put you guys in the side here for a minute. All right. With that being said, we are done with today. Don't forget that tomorrow it's free comic book day, man. Go get your comic books. I'm telling you, go get your comic books. Go get them wherever you can find comic books. It is free comic book day. I'm going to be out there. I'm going to also be part of the comic fest that's happening in White Plains, New York. Go check it out in the Galleria. Go to Spider's Web. Go to Squiggy's Comics. It's going to be a fun day tomorrow. I guarantee you, man. With that said, guys, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification, all that fun stuff that they say all the time. But please like the channel, subscribe to the channel, and spread the wealth, man. This was a fun episode, guys. And I'll see you next time on the Izzyverse. Bye, guys.